I was intrigued with your cipher breakdown. I've been interested in the Zodiac killer stuff, on and off over the years. And that's what I meant by like, not that you work on that particular project all the time, but I know you had put up, whole displays over the last couple of years, you know. And so like when you actually kind of tie it together in certain ways that I mean, it all is very logical and connects, and it is like a analytical perception that you were doing, which I like better than just XYZ equals this, so then therefore this guy's the killer.
Yeah.
That kind of makes it like a clue, like the game clue. Like it was
Well,
Colonel Mustard in the dining room with the knife.
the cipher itself. I mean, without Man Ray's art piece titled, because again, Man Ray and George Hodel, who I'm alleging is the killer, and so is his son. Um, though it's funnily enough, Steve Hodel's work doesn't actually include a breakdown of that cipher. According to the FBI, that is a cipher that is undecipherable.
Right.
um, which is interesting given the connections to George Hodel. It becomes fairly evident that it is George Hodel Jr. It's an anagram of George Hodel Jr. I mean, the way I broke it down, I think Zeal wants to get into notes here, so I'll just be really quick. But what I did was, because it's only 13 letters, thus it has to be essentially a minimum of 26 letters if it's a cipher that's going to be in English, because you require that amount of words or characters to at least paint a picture of the sort of the usage and the repetition of characters, right? In terms of the cipher and building up what the cipher actually is. However, I took a sort of divergent path in analysing and what I think is deciphering it. So what I worked out is, well, of course we have my name is, and you have the dash that links to Man Ray's work. Whose name is Doctor, and then he does that as well. He has the dash, like work out the name, and then he hides the name Hodel in the painting. And in a similar manner here, George Hodel hides his name vis-a-vis ciphers, right? And so what I did was I took George Hodel and I assumed that was the correct. It was an anagram, right? I assumed it was an anagram, the cipher. George Hodel Jr. is 13 characters long. So is the cipher, hence Z13 cipher. And then I I subdivided all of the various characters into groups depending on their frequency, right, and the instances in which they repeat. So, for example, in George Hodel, G repeats twice, O repeats twice, R repeats twice. So they're in a group, and they're 3 in number, right? And of course, you have the letter E that repeats 3 times. Thus, that is in a group, and there's only one of them in number. Moreover, the letters that only appear once in George Hodel, H, L, D, and J, they are in a group of that, their own separate group, and there's 4 in number. And then I looked to see if there was a correlation between that George Hodel Jr. and the number of groups and the instances and all of that. And lo and behold, it fits exactly. Therefore, it must be an anagram of George Hodel. And of course, I'm not just basing it on that. I mean, there's the provenance that surrounds it. So we have all of the ciphers. For example, the collogram, which is a type of visual cryptogram based on usually a composite of scripts or ciphers or what have you, or symbolism that that spells out, once it is deciphered, a name. So you have the Ogum script, which is used by Hodel in that, which again spells out his name. And then you have the Z letter, which obviously is 26, the value of the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh. And furthermore as well, even the Zodiac sign, which goes all the way back, I've traced it all the way back to a rather obscure cold case in New Orleans, the murder of Alfred Bud Lord, which was a clear murder, but the detective on the case, though he claimed it was a murder in the beginning, only a day after, like he had, changed his tune, he had got a call from the higher up. He was told to, clearly he was told to call it a suicide, right? And of course there was a calling card there on Alfred Lord's suit, pinned onto his suit with the Zodiac sign, saying he accidentally knew too much, too bad, and obviously one right into his head, one bullet into his head. So I've traced it all the way back there. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, George Hodel is the Zodiac killer. He's the Black Dahlia murderer. He's most likely also involved in a slew of other murders, like the Alfred Bud Lord murder, and also the Green Twig murder, which was 2 years after that of the Black Dahlia. But the police were covering up for him, and we have evidence of that now. A 2018 deathbed confession from W. Glenn Moran, I believe his name was. He was working for the LAPD, and he stated as much. So, yeah, I mean, it's for me. I'm fairly confident in saying that it's that George Hodel's the murderer, and I think my deciphering of his name there is I'm not bragging, but I think it's totally correct. It matches up too well. Anyway, Zeal, you wanted to get to your notes. Oh,
yeah. Sorry for the delay. 1 sec.
no, don't worry.
Yeah. No real panic with the notes. We can come to it in a second. Black Dahlia, Zodiac is something we discussed here in the past a little bit. It was something I suppose have a passing macabre, curious interest in. I think it points to something very rotten in Hollywood, Silas, and something very dark. And we talk a lot about Jabalon and the occult and the inversion and the kind of twisted concept of artistry and around that kind of manner of thinking, the inversion, kind of and a Sabbatean, almost kind of a psychosis that's characterized by people who are kind of congratulating themselves that they've arrived at some sort of a higher this kind of spiritual or self-awareness or a higher realization by basically doing the most nefarious things they can possibly think of, including murder. So I think from what I've read on this case, it seems that this particular case has the hallmarks of, the well-to-do sort of upper elite, if you want to use that word. I don't like using that word, but the upper echelon of society. Odell is a doctor, as they say around here. He's well got in Hollywood. He's well connected. He's got a big house on the boulevard, on the Hollywood cul-de-sac, perhaps. Very interesting to try and find out what else he might have been linked into. I know he's had a lot of links, right? Into I know he had a friend who I think who was a Hollywood actor who used to come to visit Ireland, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I looked at the case, but he was kind of some big 70s Hollywood actor. His name is probably fairly well-known household name type scenario. But he used to come over here, I believe, in the 70s, and Hodel was connected with him. But I think what we're looking at really here is a kind of a ritualistic, how would you say it, kind of secret society, kind of satanic, Kabbalistic, whatever you want to call it. You know, profane art exhibition, which includes the ends in the murder of this young woman, and by the sounds of it, a lot of other murders. So
Oh yeah, an absolute slew of them. I mean, there's actually so many of them, I can't get to all of them. And his son, Steve Hodel, has done a fairly good job getting to most of them. So, really, what I'm providing is, I think there's a Kabbalistic aspect to this. And Steve Hodel is not touching upon it. And I think he's not really aware of it. Of course, he's an older gentleman. And though he mentions the occult, that his father was into the occult, I don't think he actually fully realizes the entire scope of what the occult is, and all of its workings, its inner workings. So I think what you're dealing with here is, I think it is ritualistic killings. I mean, even in the Zodiac, very recent, this was in 2020, using, of course, this George Hodel had an IQ of 186, supposedly. He was a child prodigy, a musical prodigy as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we find with the ciphers that they were constructed so well, and even deciphering the ciphers it produces sort of garbled speech. It produces jumbled up letters, reversed letters, misspelled words. Again, to another layer of protection to throw them off the scent if they were to get through the first layer of, even figuring out what the cipher was. But it's only AI now that has been able to, computer software to decipher the Z340 cipher, called 340 because it has 340 characters in it. However, another connection between George Hodel, just another smoking gun, which Steve Hodel hasn't covered, between the Zodiac killer and also that of George Hodel, is that, so for example, in the Z340 cipher, and this is the deciphered text, and again, it's reconstructed because it's garbled, it's all of that, even upon the deciphering of it. Quote, I hope you're having lots of fun and trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I'm not afraid of the gas chamber. That refers to comments made on a show by a mystery caller claiming to be the Zodiac killer. It is because it will send me to paradise. He spells paradise with a C, so like dice, like rolling, throwing dice. All the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid, because I know that my life in paradise will be an easy one. Life is death, or life is excreta, or life is shit, right? Or life is waste. That's very similar.
Doesn't that sound familiar? That sounds very familiar now, based on our recent discussions with this French philosopher,
George Bataille. Yes.
George Bataille.
Yes, bingo. Which George Bataille, of course, developed that from sort of alchemical tomes that discuss Negredo or Putra, creating faction, right? Yeah. So Putra is decay, faction derives from the Latin facere, which means to do or to make. So thus, decay establishes creation, or severity, again, the left-hand side, establishes the right-hand side, or mercy, or the world. Again, this is what they believe. So he's taken that principle and stating that life is death, that, well, if I can imagine what he believes is, if he kills these women and these youth, because most of them were young, relative youngsters that he murdered, that he will keep them as slaves like a sort of soul trap. He will provide them life through death, and he will thus gain life through death. But as well, we link that to George Hodel, because within his, and I'll just get it up here if I can. No, I didn't put it there. Within his, essentially, he was a doctor, and he diagnosed himself with congestive heart failure in 1998, and he made preparations essentially to end his life.
Hodel.
Hodel did, yeah. He died a year later in 99. He didn't kill himself. He died of natural causes. However, he wrote a suicide note, and within the suicide note, he didn't give the suicide note because he didn't end up killing himself. He stored it away in his desk, and it was only found after he passed away and all of his possessions were given to his son. Hence why Steve Hodel looked into his father as the Dahlia murderer. He got effects, and he got his father's effects and photographs of, which included photographs of Elizabeth Short, and other murderous paraphernalia, should we say. But he states in the suicide note to his wife, June at the time, to destroy all of his effects, all of his property, right? To basically bury all of the evidence that links him to all these murders. And furthermore, right at the end, he mentions life, L equals excreta, which is essentially shorthand for, life equals excretion.
Yeah.
So again, it's the same as the Zodiac killer, which we've now just deciphered in 2020. Life is death, or life is excreta. And then he held to that belief because he put it in his final will and testament, essentially, in the suicide note, that life is excreta. There's also other connections regarding he actually bought, I believe you can do this through a website, but he did it, where he bought a constellation in the, he bought a star in the constellation of Aquila, or Latin for the eagle, and named it, George Hodel Jr. or something like that. But there's something regarding that constellation. It links with 8. And of course, the number 8. Even George Hodel's name, the name Hodel, adds to 44 in English gematria and things like that. Again, 4 plus 4 is 8. The 8, the infinite, and all of this. It links to the esoteric, but Hodel isn't actually the family's real name. When they moved to the US, his parents from Russia, due to the pogroms there, he was Jewish, of course. They took on that name Hod El. So again, Hod in Hebrew means glory, and El means God, hence glory to God. So yeah, it's absolutely, because his career as a serial killer was so long. There is literally and of course the police were running cover for him, allowing him to do this. They're ritualistic killings. They're Kabbalistic ritualistic killings that the government were sanctioning. And I think they were sanctioning them because the media were pushing it. They were pushing the hysteria. I think it was part of the social experiment. The various social experiments, because this man had a very long and a bloody career. For the government to gain data on mass formation psychosis in relation to serial killers. I think that was the entire crux of it. That's what it was.
Give me that last bit. Give me that last observation again. Can you restate that just for me?
I personally think the reason the government were sanctioning it, among other reasons, is because the social experiment that was being conducted there by these serial killings and
Yeah.
being pushed absolutely fervently, zealously by the media, whipping up hysteria, was designed as a social experiment to gain data on the effects of mass formation psychosis on an invisible killer running loose amongst the community, which of course we we had the effects of that within 2020. Need I mention it? So yeah, I think that's the reason for it.
Just as you mentioned the Russian connection in Hodel's earlier family, which is a whole study in itself, you know, the whole movement of people from Russia after the expulsion out of Russia, I assume under Tsar Nicholas. And then, you know, revenge is taken with the, as we're told, or as we understand, with the assassination of the Tsar and the subsequent Red Terror, some or all of which was funded from New York. So there's a whole subterranean war going on there, you know. But like as a backdrop, you know, that in the early part of the 20th century in Russia leads to the murder of 100 million Russian citizens. So somewhere in that maelstrom of homicide, murder, misery, pain, suffering, and all that came with it, you know, essentially the gates of hell were opened upon the Russian people and across Europe as well, soon to follow, you know, in the 30s and 40s. But somewhere in that kind of macabre abyss that flooded across the land, a dark, creeping entity that showed up, you know, in the midst of humanity. In Russia, I think, and I had the sense that there was a manifestation of a kind of occult or a kind of an aesthetic that was pinned in around the stuff like homicide, Satanism, and any kind of perversion or darkness that you can think of. And what's Hodel's conclusion? He comes to life is
Life
shit
is
or
death,
excreta.
yeah. Life is excreta, is waste, is a product of
Right.
waste, yeah.
So this it ties in a little bit with George Bataille's Solar Anus, as I understand it, anyway. Kind of concept like of and these sound like shocking terms, but essentially, as I understand it, what they're trying to do in an occult sense is join and thwart the sides of life which are creative with waste, the other side of life which is waste. So instead of somehow, if you can rewire existence from its creative impulse of spirit and catch that side of it and wire it back into its waste side as a kind of to invert it, if you will. But going back to the Russia thing, as you were mentioning there, it reminded me of this. We spoke about Alexander Dugin, a Russian kind of right wing politician, very interesting character. But Dugin, when in his earlier years, was part of what was known as the Yuzhinsky Circle, who were an avant-garde, quote, dissident group which dabbled in Satanism, esoteric Nazism, and other forms of the occult. And so what you're looking at really in Russia, perhaps in Moscow and perhaps in Russia around this time and around these types of characters is a sort of a death cult, kind of a macabre fixation with death, murder, and sort of darkness as a kind of a spiritual you've arrived, it's a sign that you'd arrived at a certain point if you were practicing these kinds of rituals or these kinds of so it sounds like Hodel might have been tied into this kind of thing somehow, and it certainly feels, or for anyone who's interested in this stuff, murder in Hollywood is a whole subcategory interest area. There's a guy on Rumble. I don't know if you're familiar with the platform Rumble, RUMBLE, and his name is Juxtaposition One. It goes by that handle.
Yes.
And he does a
Yes.
whole lot of stuff on murder in Hollywood. And it's very interesting because, like, why he's particularly interesting is he's from California, and he worked as an auditor with kind of financial people. So he actually lives in the neighborhood of some of where these murders took place. So he's not just like some outsider who's getting the info on off the net. He's into cycling. So he goes around some of these places on his bicycle. So he knows the actual streets and where the cul-de-sac is, and he knows who used to live in such a house, and all these cul-de-sacs and what's going on in the Hollywood Hills. And like his basic overall theory kind of thing is that the entire edifice of Hollywood is absolutely completely controlled from the top down, and all these celebrities are absolutely controlled. Everything they do is controlled. That the house they live in is under surveillance. Their wardrobe is provided for them. They're essentially an asset, kind of like, and it ties over into a kind of a deep state paramilitary murder gang kind of activities, and all sorts of weird stuff, pornography, you name it, anything underhand or dark is very much sewn into the Hollywood Hills. So it's no surprise there that nestled in that kind of those shadowy corners that Hodel is in there as well. So it's a very interesting case study that has a wider, like, if you look at someone like Hodel and you start to look at the wider, where the spider web is sewn into the corners of that dark room, you start to learn a lot of other stuff. You know what I mean? Other areas. So he's a very fascinating character for all the wrong reasons.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's tied into the esoteric or the occult, Kabbalah. It's tied into all of this. I mean, it's all of it's interconnected. There's some really twisted individuals that are in charge of this world. But of course, I mean, it's like what you're saying. I mean, again, this is probably why they had to get rid of the Gnostics. The Gnostics had this idea that the demiurge, this idea that life is death or life is waste, or it's a product of excreta. The reason I suspect they had to get rid of the Gnostics is because they had this creation myth where the demiurge created this world of clay, yet it was inanimate. He couldn't quite figure out how can I imbue the spark of life within it. So, I mean, there's two conceptions of this within the creation myth of the Gnostics, the early Christian Gnostics. That firstly, that he sent out his harbingers, his followers, his angels, if you will, the demiurge did, and murdered this angel of light, who was one of the aeons, and he stole his essence of light and imbued it within these inanimate forms of clay that he had crafted, and thus the world was born, man was born. Hence why we are an involuted essence of God, trapped within this sort of biological sephira, this vessel, as the Kabbalists would call it. Or secondly, the Gnostics believed that he deceptively got Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom, who had actually created the demiurge Yaldabaoth as an abortive creation, vis-a-vis her sin of attempting to be like God, be like the source, and establish creation through pure unity. So the demiurge, or Yaldabaoth, deceptively tricked her into looking into the sort of holy grail or the waters of life, and thus capturing her reflection. And from that reflection did he then imbue the spark of life into the inanimate clay. So in that essence, you can see where, dare I say, even the Abrahamic, right, or Kabbalistic view of this all comes from. And that is, they believe, if you read the Old Testament, you can sort of glean the Gnostic creation myth from it, that the demiurge, or Yahweh, created this world of inanimate clay, yet he needed something higher to imbue within it. Thus, something had to be sacrificed. The accursed share had to be sacrificed, as George Bataille stated, to thus imbue within man that energy which makes him man, which gives him his clay vessel, his clay mind, the spark of life. It is, I mean, you're getting into very deep esoteric topics here, but it seems the people that are in charge of the system seem to believe this wholeheartedly, which is sort of perplexing. It's head scratching. Why would supposedly learned men like, pardon me, George Hodel, with a supposed IQ of 186, a child prodigy, why would he subscribe to such, phantasmical ideas such as this? It's
Well, I
very,
think that's a
it's
very
very
good
peculiar.
question. That's a very good question. And you see, the sort of, maybe you're better off not knowing the answer to that. Because if you did, you might end up doing it yourself.
I have
I'm
a
saying,
theory.
yeah, go on.
It's George Hodel having such a high IQ. This is where the phrase, it's a very thin line between genius and insanity comes from.
Mm.
And it applies to this in the sense that a person like George Hodel or any other serial killer, in studies of pathogenics and parapsychology and all these different things, they're experiencing the worst form of torture while like living in the illusion of being surrounded by everything they want. So they're essentially solitary confinement patients out in the open world. So they actually feel as if they are in solitary confinement due to their genius level, prodigical, whatever you want to call it, right? All their little nonsense that they've been told. Think about it. If you were tested at 6 years old and you're told you're a prodigy, how are you supposed to take that information?
Mm.
And now everywhere you go for the rest of your life, and especially with these people, even if they're just people in Hollywood, kids going to private schools, CEOs of major companies, politicians, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody in the 10, 20, $30 million net worth type circles and up, like them and their children. And most of them were the same as their children 50, 60 years ago. And so were their parents. And so were their parents. And all of these people have lived, that in the elitist classes, there's only a few thousand of them, a few 10,000 now. Maybe they're up to 100 these days. And I'm sure it goes up and down just like the mass population does. And when you're in such a small group like that, you are essentially in a form of solitary confinement, except you're not. You know what I mean? Like, you're not actually sitting in a prison cell of actual solitary confinement to which the most extreme criminals convicted go to. You're in a world where you have almost no boundaries and limits by the resources you've been given. Yet you can't interact or have any sort of empathetic emotion or any type of physical connection, like that. Those type of people can't come into this group right now and join our conversation at this moment, or most of our conversations ever. That they won't be able to understand it. We won't be able to explain it the same as they can't explain their point of views to us so much either. All it comes out is that garbled nonsense that you hear and like all the stuff that Silas deciphered from Hodel, or like what you're gonna hear. I would say there's all the other agents too that are just like this. You have Marilyn Manson, right? and then you have Hollywood's embellishment of all of these characters. And then, I mean, even as both of you are describing, especially Silas, when you're talking about Yaldabaoth and what these people actually envision, they're the same ones that make all these Greek and Roman and mythical movies, pagan, right? And what's it about? It's always about like Yaldabaoth and sacrificing something to it and killing the gods and becoming God yourself. And essentially that life is shit. Like that is the underlying message in a majority of them. You know, Gladiator, Wrath of the Titans, you name it doesn't matter if it goes into the mythos. Like that's usually what they're talking about, and I think Silas is right. It's like a group like the Gnostics were onto the idea and understood that, but I think they understood it in a different perception, where the powerful groups that be, you know, are these ruling powers or priest class, you know, with all their resources and might and power. They see it in this total nihilistic, just garbage way, where the Gnostics were the opposing view. And essentially, that's what the masses are. You know, we cherish life and empathy and care for each other and do all of these other things. That's completely opposite of what they understand at this point, from living in this form of solitary confinement to which they put themselves. Just like you would actually physically get yourself in solitary confinement in a prison. You put yourself there still, right? By going on like a killing spree and you're not signed up with the group and part of the occult and doing it in a ritualistic way, you'll end up in solitary confinement, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So that's what, I was kind of discussing this with Yana a little bit yesterday, and critical as far as like how all these movies are portrayed that way. And we ended up touching on like Revolver, Fight Club, and what else to bring up? Altered Carbon. All of these shows express exactly what I'm talking about, that they're expressing to us as a population. It doesn't even have to be in mockery or anything like that. They're actually expressing the same things that Hodel expressed in his artistic killing through movies, music, media, radio, you name it. Are they not? I mean, if you really look at all of it, like what are movies? You know, what's the genre? Like the genre is drama, death, murder, right?
Mm.
And they express it over and over and over again. And it's just got a bunch of you can call them veils or whatever, but all it is appeals. They're just appealing to the audience, and they inverse the message to trick you because it's going to pull you in and draw you on, what we're attracted to. But if you really read into like what they're saying, and they talk about these beautiful paradises and stuff, like the Spartans, it makes me think of the Spartan sayings, at least from the movie scripts, right? Where it's like, oh, dying in war is, that's the beautiful death, right? The beautiful death is to go and be in the most confrontational, psychopathic situation and be slaughtered. That's a beautiful death. Really? I mean, I'd consider myself to be some sort of a fighter, or warrior when push comes to shove, but I don't think I would ever consider that a beautiful death. I would consider it slaughter. It's gruesome, gory, it's horrendous, right? Is any of this
Well,
making sense, or am I just
yeah,
rambling right
no, it
now?
is. It is. It is. It is because we'll say, like, in simple terms, like, what is the MO? What's, as the fella says, what is their motivation? So motivation number one, as you say, Reagan, is, they are in that confined, solitary confinement. They've been cut off from empathy or from love or whatever. Or they've existed in that dark space for so long that it's rubbed off on them, and they've kind of took on that character, that kind of DNA. It's in their DNA, so to speak. You know, they're breeding, if you will. They're kind of it's what they know, and it's kind of, it may, perhaps comes with power or their own concepts of ascendancy or psychopathy or whatever. So there's a whole thing there. But what I also wonder is, you know, in the deeper kind of esoteric hidden knowledge of how all this stuff works, if there isn't some kickback involved for them in terms of a spiritual and or physical reward from, again, it's speaking in occult kind of terms, but you know, in terms of a spiritual entity or an entity that they may, you know, be in communion with, if you will, that there's some kickback from that dark force if they make these kind of a, you know, if they, you know, peddle their dark arts, their sacrifices or their murders or whatever it is, if there's not some, so you see, I wonder, like, there must be sort of a rationale behind it, like.
I think it's the same rationale as freedom fighters in the Middle East. You know, they're empty promises of 72 virgins, right? Like all these people, I know in certain people's memoirs or letters that were dug up, which who knows what they really are, if they were really written by the person, et cetera, et cetera. But in a lot of those, like, you know, final memoirs or some notes or deathbed confessions and stuff, you hear a lot of, you know, the truth come out, right? In some sense. And they kind of explain the whole purpose of their intent in some way, and what they're going to get and what their desires were and stuff. And usually it is something about, like, if it's not 72 virgins in heaven or hell, it's slaves, or it's, they're promised by this beast that they'll be given a throne and a crown. I would say that's just where the story of the serpent in the garden, that's what that's describing, right? You know, it's the falsivity. You're just promised false stuff, or you're promised it in a deceptive way, right? Yeah, you can be a ruler in my kingdom, but what does that actually mean to be a ruler in this particular kingdom that's being developed, that you're fighting for? Like, what do you really know about it, right? I think that's the contract. That's the blood contracts. It's the right. It's described in many, many different ways, but they're essentially all the same thing. They're all being given false promise.
See, I don't know. Coming across this stuff we spoke about last night with Silas,
And accept. Do you not accept it? Because there's just a certain point where limited human contact is gonna crack. We're just not designed that way, to live in complete solitude. That's where we came from. Pure potential is that's we're in the opposing actionable force, not the thought, right? So
Well,
I just
I
go
mean
ahead.
as well. You see you see this development within society itself right now, where the atomization of individuals, obviously engineered to a great extent, it's leading to, again, that sort of centripetalism back to that pure potential, back to that void. And what is in that void of, total atomization, total isolation? The in a way, the total separation and the realization of the total unity between you and everyone else. So it's in that limbo state where, again, you really believe that death is life and life is death, and you don't fully separate it out, at least even to maintain your own sanity within existence. Then what inevitably ends up happening is like what really we're seeing with society, a mental breaking of it. People are taking on personas. No one really is themselves now, though they keep, exclaiming in a sort of way to fend off the insanity of it all, that they're acting as their true selves, right? That they're trying to be their authentic self. And in this, they sort of bring forth a neurotic, narcissistic persona. They wear the masks that social media and the various fashions dictate that they wear. And in this, they become the grey man, the plastic man. They are malleable, and they are, their plasticized personality is molded by the engineers of society in that way. So in that sense, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think these people are born of a same. I think they're more intelligent, of course, than the majority. I do, of course. They're insane. They're absolutely insane, but there's a genius somewhere there. But I do think that their isolation, spurred on by multiple factors, their potential genius being one of them, maybe, it's led them to that void. They've become children of the void, as Aleister Crowley stated. I mean, this thing that they worship also goes by Coronzon, which is the dweller of the abyss, or the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, a potential etymology from Greek could be the begetter of the abyss. So you have this idea that they are children of the void. They are children of the abyss. They are the offspring of that transcendence, not to something which is not to heaven, but to the literal birthplace of nothing. And I honestly, I think this is the idea that's kept them together. That this idea, this truth that they've found within the seedbed of nothing, within their insanity, they've found this truth and they've clung to it. And it's how they seek to become not just engineers of mankind, but engineers of the world. To re-engineer, to, again, tikkun or rectify the entire world, under their mad image. It's very much like Dr. Frankenstein in that sense. You're playing with fire, but you can't help yourself. Like a child, you've got to put your hand into the flames just to see what will happen. But they never learn. It's a constant repeat. It seems
This time it won't burn me, right? Like, this time it won't hurt me.
Yeah.
Try again. This time, okay. Now it won't hurt me. Try again. It's continuous. Like there's no learning involved.
Yeah, well, I don't think there can be rigging because it's to me, my understanding of it is it's addiction. It follows the same like chronic,
I've said
embedded
it for
addiction.
years at AA meetings to all the AA people. I told them over and over again, the worst addiction on the planet is power.
Yeah.
Not fucking alcohol.
Yeah.
They didn't like that.
But go on.
but
Go on.
it's not something that's as tangible as chemical substances, as even like with technology. I mean, I remember back in the early 2000s, it only became rather new, and it probably fizzled out just as fast as it flared up. Was digital technology addiction,
Mhm.
right? People addicted to social media and Facebook and Instagram, or just to their phones in general. You know, they had these like just like any other anonymous group. You'd show up, but you had to like leave your phone at the front and go sit in the session the whole hour without it. And you would see there's people like going nuts. I mean, like they were literally, it looked like they were having an active seizure at times for some people because they didn't have their phone in their hand, you know,
Mm.
and they actually experienced full on seizures, blackouts. You know, a lot of people who just had fidgets and tics, and you know, these therapists and stuff are struggling to keep these people even in their chairs, you know, and they couldn't go 50 minutes without their phone. They're freaking out.
Well, some of the stuff I was looking at reading a little bit there last night was talking about new technologies that use nanotechnology and use kind of molecular communications. They call it. They've figured out the various sort of molecular machinery that moves signals around inside your body on a kind of cellular level, essentially on a and what they're talking about doing really is interfacing in the future, or perhaps in the near future, interfacing the human body with digital technology, so that you'll have an immersive experience with the digital world that'll include, the sensation of touch, of smell, sensations of fear, pleasure, perhaps, and all the rest of it. Um, with your kind of immersive experience with the digital world. So probably what you're going to see going forward is a kind of a heroin epidemic, if you will, of digital addiction. That the human being is not really going to be, vast swathes of the society perhaps are going to get sucked into this machine, because it's going to be, they'll enjoy it, and they'll feel like a heroin addict with the needle. They feel they've arrived, and the needle
Yeah.
becomes freedom for the heroin addict, as will this digital realm, the bio digital realm, for a whole section of humanity. So you're into a scenario and a stage where actually I think you're going to have to be very strong, or very at least aware, or whatever, to be able to avoid it, or to have any sense that it's dangerous as such. Like, because some of the stuff there that's coming out now, the internet of bio bio things, whatever, they have a lot of kind of nanotechnology. They have a lot of technology that can interface directly with your body, you're internally inside your body, and affect changes. And what the world around you is a frequency machine of nodes and communications devices, which is set up and ready to go, or is running as we speak. So you're sort of in the soup of frequency transmission and reception, and your body being one of those nodes that's subject to being reprogrammed, or whatever, what have you. So you're kind of into very strange territory. And the more the thing is advancing, it's getting, the quicker it gets, it's exponentially accelerating into this different world. Like, so addiction and the framework and characteristics of addiction, I think, are very much going to be present. And I think a whole section of society is going to find themselves caught up in it, but it'll be branded as, civilizational improvement, or the next, progress. It'll be branded as progress. Mankind has progressed, but it'll actually be a sick kind of form of addiction. And Silas is
I
talking
think we're
there.
already there.
I beg your pardon.
I think we're already there.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure there will be more advertisement, more sales. They'll, different things will release in different areas. We'll see lots of news reports and wars and all sorts of things will occur. But ultimately, I still see that you're gonna reach critical mass at some point.
Yeah.
Which thing will reach critical mass doesn't matter, right? No matter what, once you reach critical mass, everything explodes. So
Mhm.
whether it's the you know powers that be that break into like total insanity and we'll just say hit all the nuclear buttons for whatever that means. I mean, we
Mm.
still have bombs and things that do blow up and can cause much destruction. There are biochemical agents out there, whether we know what they are or not. They're very damaging, and or the financials could collapse, and then everything
Mm.
blows from there. Natural disasters could be ramping up right now because, like you're saying, if they're really cloud seeding, throwing all these other elements up into the upper sky, throwing
Mm.
crap in the ocean, our regular human pollution, uh, all these different things that are already occurring. Okay, we're already creating an environment that's about to light up in some way. The power is being consolidated. And if you want to talk about running some crazy network that actually is this supposed AI algorithmic god that's going to be able to control everything, see
Mm.
everything, hear everything, how much power consumption do you think that's going to take?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
This
it's
is the.
like
Sorry,
the
Regan, you
power
continue.
the power consumption alone, I'm saying, is like whether it's the like entity thing that they're trying to make itself or the powered source that they're trying to generate to create it, one of those things is going to like explode before the other, most likely.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's one of the even in construction that we're seeing that I've seen really in the last year or so, I suppose, is two facets. Number one is power, as you say, extra essentially electrical power that's needed to run this entire machine. I mean, I'm on a job here presently, however long I'm going to last on it, and they're putting jet engines in on the site, basically kind of General Electric jet engines that are powered by kerosene to give it extra power to the grid. And like it's kind of funny because it's rush, build the machine, build progress, and all it's all cheap labor on site. No offense to
Yeah.
the Romanian guys, some of them are hard workers, but they haven't a clue what they're doing. So like, I'm walking around the site with my colleague, and he's like pointing stuff like, because look, there's not a straight line anywhere. All the concrete, it's all off. It's all
Yeah.
kind of bends in it and mistakes and them. But it's like that kind of mad scientist, TV trope or archetype, and there's some big clumsy machine that he's built, an infernal machine, and the steam coming out of it, and it's cracking, and the rivets look like they're going to pop, and it's shaking, and he's drive it harder. He's like, he's in that addictive kind of mania, like, and he's just pushing it further. The whole thing is quick, and like, and you know what I mean? It's like,
But he
Just
doesn't
fix
see
it,
the
make it
operations
work.
to. He doesn't see the operations to create the thing. He already has the vision in his mind.
yeah,
The vision is
yeah,
already perfect. So therefore, even if he produces in the process of creating his vision something that's imperfect, or he, you know, it destroys the world, it doesn't
mm,
matter because in his mind the vision is already perfect. It's the zealotry of it all, that they've already assumed that what they believe, that the vision that they have derived either from religious sources or mystery religions or whatever, the philosophy, that it is sacrosanct, it is beyond reproach, and therefore it is perfect, and everything that it instructs of us to create must thus be perfect too. Which
mm,
clearly it's not. I mean, the world that it's establishing is a hellscape. I mean, even for them, it will be a hellscape. I can't
But the
see.
trip, all the details, all the
Mm.
kind of normal rationale gets lost in the vision. You know, the vision is
Oh,
the bit that fucks you up because it's intoxicating, and everything else, all reality disintegrates because
this.
it's like that girlfriend you shouldn't have had, or if you're a lady, that guy you shouldn't have been with. It's you had a vision of some kind of love situation that was absolutely toxic or destructive, but you still ran with it because you got sort of caught up in a poetic moment of your own sort of bullshit, like and you ended up in pain because you kind of couldn't let go of it. It's kind of like got that addictive flavor, or the same thing perhaps for the heroin addict putting the needle in his arm. It's you lose sight of everything else, and that's pretty much where they're at. But it remains to be seen something's going to give.
Well, this is the thing as well. I mean, of course, the power is a big issue for them, right? But the what they are discussing right now is they are discussing using DNA to
Yeah.
store more data than they could within data centers, and to
Mm,
furthermore produce the power required. I mean, this is almost like from the Matrix.
mm,
I created a video about this, God, maybe 6 or maybe a year ago actually now. But producing the power to thus store this data and to furthermore um, uh, sort of generate, generate for a grid, right? A
yeah.
hypothetical future grid. Now, again, they're
Yeah.
not there yet, but they're thinking along these lines. See, this is the problem. It doesn't matter. You actually want it to sort of be possible, because if it's impossible, the damage it will wrought is even more terrifying than if it was possible. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the sort of debate or not the debate, the argument we were having, or not the even argument, the discussion rather, we were having yesterday with Critical and the
Mm,
Panic Master and Wadi, that
mm,
it, this idea where they're saying, well, this isn't possible, but you sort of want it to be possible, because if it's not, then they're going to destroy the whole bloody world.
mm,
If it's impossible, then the seismic changes that they require to bring their vision to fruition. If it's impossible, it will cause untold damage that will last for dozens of generations. And
mm.
I mean, this is the problem. This is
Mhm.
really, we have a religious cult at the head, at the apex of power right now. They are motivated by unfathomable doctrines and dogmas that to us are completely inhuman, but to them, they believe our critique of their dogmas is inhuman. That they see their evil is not evil, but good, and they see our critique of it as evil. And the only reason we critique what they believe is evil, is because we ourselves are evil, right? That's what they believe. So they have this convenient idea of a bifurcation of the species, that it is them and us, right? That we aren't wise enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know, we don't care.
Yeah.
Is
We have to be
is what they say.
educated.
Yes, we don't care enough about the species like they do, right, to destroy the world. But they don't believe they're destroying the world. They believe this is the next stage of human evolution. And
Yeah.
of course, they don't even believe us human to a degree. So, I mean, ultimately,
That's just the first step in any war.
yes,
Dehumanization.
yes, you have to hate the enemy. You have to see them as animals. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Well,
I'm mhm.
go on.
No, I was
Sorry.
going to mention as well regarding the nanolipid particles and
Yeah.
lipid nanoparticles rather,
Mm,
and these are being used currently. I believe they're actually beyond the experimentation stage, So these are getting ready, I think, for patents and general usage within the commercial environment. So these lipid nanoparticles can be used as vehicles for therapeutics, quote quote, right, or needle crafts, right, the special magical elixir. So, I mean, my God, if these nanoparticles have the ability to take in, to absorb EMF and to then radiate it outwards, emit it. I mean, can you imagine that? And they have,
So,
they have,
just on
yeah,
that note, spring 2004, I think it was NBC, might have been ABC, nightly news, 6 o'clock. I can't remember the doctor's name. He wasn't even really a doctor. He was a radiologist. And he used nanoparticles injected into patients that would seek out cancer cells, insert themselves into the cancer cells, and then he would radiate the patient with radio waves and destroy cancer immediately. And that was, early 2000s. And it's just some news report that I've not been able to find on any site anywhere.
Well, the other side of it is that you may not actually what they're talking about now is you may not need to inject any nanoparticle.
Right.
You
And
may
that
be
would
able to
be,
use the
that's like
molecules within the body. Sorry.
yeah,
like the Sabrina Wallace stuff.
Yeah, that's what she's kind of talking about, and not just her, but some of the
There's
documentation.
others. Look
Essentially,
out for Charlie's been talking about it 10 years too.
yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, about it, the Bluffer's Guide to it is that you can, they have the technology effectively to initiate elements within the human body on a molecular level to make molecular machines from without inside the human body to do whatever, either to rearrange stuff around within the body or to interface with the electromagnetic fields external to the body. So again, just to restate that, you don't need a nanobot in there. You can do it with a molecule. So they've analyzed the transitory communication networks within the body, how different molecules and lipids, whatever the hell it is, but proteins, whatever is moving around in your body for your biological processes, and they've harnessed them, isolated them, and they can reroute them. Perhaps reroute the DNA, RNA code that tells them what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So, including the body and perhaps up into and including the brain. So this is where stuff is at right now. We read that. I don't know if we get a chance, Silas, if we post this discussion, we might try and put a link to that article that I sent you. Maybe if anyone's interested in it, to give it a bit of a read. It's fairly readable, but it's Sabrina Wallace was someone that came across not so long ago on the net that's been talking about this kind of stuff. Her family, actually, she says, are ex-military or are military intelligence, and she seems to be someone that basically got pissed off with the way this technology is going, and she's tried to bring some public awareness around it. This ties in with 6G and terahertz communication. Terahertz on the electromagnetic spectrum is somewhere up around microwave radiation and infrared. So it's the terahertz communication is what would happen with these molecular machine nodes in your body, and it would enable them to communicate with the external sort of frequency soup that's all around you. So you could have the public street light is talking to some protein moving around in your liver or something, trying to
yeah.
direct it to do whatever, or And like, it kind of beggars belief. It's, I don't know. It's I know it's how far out all that kind of sounds, but supposedly this is where they're at.
Well, and this is the claim where they're at, right?
Yeah, this is the claim. Yeah.
And I would say, even if true, you have your own defense. I think you do, for the record. It's your body. Whether you took injections, got nano in through your Q-tips or through your drinking water, if they're making the claim that they can produce these things using frequency waves from external area, these things, you'll be fine. If you're practicing any type of discernment, you actually seek things out. If you just try at life at all, I don't see how you'd be affected by this in any way, shape, or form. I think the only people who fall victim to it are those who believe they're falling victim to it. Just like you see in all these crazy videos with targeted individuals, right? There's millions of channels on that. Millions of channels. How many of those people are doing the same thing I just described that the elitists? They're living in this delusional solitary confinement that they're just driving themselves insane, to the point that there doesn't even have to be some external entity doing a bunch of frequency on these people. They're going to just, anywhere they go, the shopping mall, they're going to think some dude's following. They're going to go wild about any little, the devices you grab, Zealberg. God forbid these people get their hands on those devices. They would be running all over the place thinking that everything's attacking them from every direction. And I'm not saying they're wrong. You're still alive, like you're still going through life, and you seem to be experiencing this extra attack from an external force based on information you can't verify. And the information is about your own internal body, in which, for the most part, from my understanding, you have full control of. You have the intention. So if they're going to be trying to produce a molecular body inside of your body, can you not prevent it with your thought alone and the control over your own temple, your own being? I may be wrong, but
You may be right.
felt about it.
You may be right, because ultimately, and again, we're talking about stuff that it's into the mysterium. Thought is frequency. It's an electrical resonance within your body. So if you have that kind of belief, and who's to say that it doesn't have a resonant effect within your body, and it can offset anything that might be trying to send you in the opposite direction. But just very quickly, for anyone who's interested in a kind of who hasn't heard of this area before, the article that I've had a quick look at is by it's called The Internet of Bio-Nano Things, a review of the applications, enabling technologies, and key challenges. And it's from the ITU Journal on Future and Evolving Technologies, Volume 2, 2021. So it's already a couple of years old, but it gives a kind of it uses a lot of the terminology. I don't know, Silas, do you think we could post this on the description if possible for this, we post this
Yes,
video?
I will. You'll have to send me it though, because I'm going
Fair
back
enough.
through
Check if
the
you check
audio.
your email.
No, because we posted it in the audio chat notes in that other server, exit through the gift shop, but unfortunately it seems to be gone.
Ho ho ho! I wonder how that happened. But well, it wouldn't surprise me. But let's just see. I'll flick it over to you here. But they use effectively, they're saying the stuff is at a very advanced kind of rate of development. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just reading it like anyone else, trying to get my head around it. But it kind of makes sense that, you've got all these devices and telecommunications kind of speaking with one another along the electromagnetic spectrum. So it's like to say, well, let's hook the human body up. It would seem to me to be a prime objective for the power structure. Rather than you're having external influences like propaganda and psyops and
Oh, I've got
all
it.
sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So now you can go directly in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to prompt a behavioral response. You can get right in there and kind of, rewrite the framework sort of thing. So it would open the door for all sorts of crisis narratives, including,
Yeah.
they can give
This
you
is this
sickness and the
idea
cure.
of Harari spoke about it, genetic hacking. So
Yeah.
essentially, they're not just digitally terraforming the planet and the environment, the external environment, but they're digitally terraforming the internal environment of the human body, the very biological system, to thus become a bio-digital receptacle for
Yes.
their new control grid.
Yes. But is this not, Silas, theoretically what they've done in previous incarnations and re-engineering of the human being that we've heard about in the
Yeah.
kind of mystery
it's
schools going back in the millennia lost in the distant past?
Or
from
the
the
Roman
Tower of
Empire.
the Roman Empire. I mean, even the Tower of Babel, they spoke
Yeah.
one language, and in those days, that's what they said. I
So
mean,
did we.
of course, as well. I mean, I think of course, a lot of people take that literally, that they spoke literally one language. It was a world empire. But perhaps what they mean by that is it's one frequency. They all adhered to
Yeah.
one frequency
Yeah.
from a tower.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
it's
today, with the computer language is all in English.
It's all code, which derives from the Hebrew kodesh, which is holy, or the breath, literally the breath, the frequency, the imbuement of the spark of vitality.
And you found one of those, Zeal. 802.
Yeah, it's like the electrical engineering standard for the kind of 6G stuff is in around. It's called such and such standard 802, but it seems to be the standard.
That's the hertz of the frequency it's at.
Yeah, exactly. So they
Right.
named the standard after the actual frequency it's at. Seemingly, it seems, if I'm right in saying that.
But when you look it up, right, it says that it was just the next sequence in numbers, and it has no rhyme or reason to why they named it that. But that's suggesting that they had 801 standards since electrical engineering was introduced, and that's a lie.
Yeah, I'd say that's a straight. That's very, very suspicious, Reagan. Is it not?
Well, I just know like we studied it. There was no codes of like 799 or 750 or 280. There was no pre-existing codes like they're saying. So they're just not giving where the code came from at all, throughout my education, at least, and their camps. But
Just
that
very quickly,
standard was
Reagan.
what we learned. I had to
Just
learn.
very quickly, these terms 5G, 6G, are these kind of industry marketing terms to designate certain bandwidths? I mean, they're not any kind of a scientifically or engineering. They're not a physics terminology. 5G and 6G. In
I
other
think
words,
it is.
you wouldn't have had those terms necessarily in a physics book in the 1970s, no, in a textbook.
You would, when you were
Okay.
talking about traveling at speeds faster than the sound barrier.
Yeah, but only in that context.
Well, I mean, that is the context you're still speaking of when you're talking
Oh,
about
okay.
bandwidth. In a way, it's hard to describe. That's why it's contorted. All this information's contorted and twisted and then fed to us in this messed up way.
Well, like when they say 5G, 6G, they mean fifth generation and sixth generation of.
No, I think
No.
that's more of the electromagnetic force that is being projected out. So just like the G force you're experiencing at each level past the sound
Okay.
barrier in the plane, So that's why I'm saying you need more power, right? In order to upgrade to what they're calling 6G, that's the amount of hertz that they're going to be pumping out, right? Now,
Yeah.
they always say most of our devices are at 2.4 gigahertz through 4G and 5G. I would assume that's actually been going up, but they're just not reporting it. They're just still selling the devices to us labeled as 2.4 gigahertz. I would assume it's actually gone up a lot. The problem is the FDA standards and all the other red tape and stuff. In order to get around that, they decided just to straight up lie and keep selling us more and more powerful equipment at higher and higher gigahertz that you're not going to know unless you buy one of the devices that you have and test it out for yourself, because
Yeah.
they're going to be mislabeled, or they're going to say some nonsense, just like, like it actually does work horsepower, right? Some bullshit out there like that and be like, oh no, the devices are still only actively affecting humans at 2.4 gigahertz, but the real output of it is 6.8 gigahertz. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's all wordplay. It's all about the advertising, how you sell it, right? You know.
Mm.
So I think the 5G, 6G, 2G, 3G, all that stuff was the amount of whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm just saying EMF. It has to do a lot with electricity. I know for sure. Um, but that's what I think those things mean. I think the generation thing is just the cover story. That's just the cover advert, right? Oh, this is the next sixth gen, right? Sixth generation. That's how they're selling it. And then that's how later on in the court they can say, no, we told them, we said it was, 4G and then 5G, right? You see how that works? It's kind of
Yeah.
like a,
Yeah. I'm just having a quick flick here. Quote. This is from Wikipedia. The third generation partnership project 3GPP is an umbrella term for a number of standards organizations which develop protocols for mobile telecommunications. It is best
yeah,
known for its work in the development and maintenance of GSM 2G and 2.5G standards, UMTS and related 3G standards, 4G, etc., 5G, and so on and so forth. So it
and that's
seems
where I
that,
would say the devices remained labeled at 2 point something gigahertz, but really with each generation it's increased.
hmm,
That's where I would say that would have happened. That's why our devices are still stuck with labels saying 2.4 gigahertz.
hmm.
See what I mean? Like, I mean, I just kind of thought of all that as we've been talking about this, and as you read that information, it just it does fit. Now,
Hmm.
was that coincidence?
Well, man, all bets are off. What we're heading into at the moment, who knows? Because you
Well,
know what I mean. With all that kind of stuff, that's a lot of chaos magic happening. So there's a lot of resonances in what what you might think and perceive and what actually is. So it's kind of
I,
we're
I've
in that kind of realm.
I've posted it there. That was 4 years ago that I created that. Yeah, it would have been 4 years ago that I created that infographic regarding what I term the hive negative feedback loop. I mean, that's ultimately based on my reading of the various first, second, third order cybernetics and a general overview of the most prominent um, professors, scholars within that those respective stratum of cybernetic thought. That's what I determined that they were looking for. Um, this sort of homeostatic, um, sort of homeostatic self-regulating system Ultimately, that's what they're looking for, based around artificial sense organs, which won't just sense the various emotional states, the biological stimulus within the internal environment of the individual, or again the society in general, be it a region or a 15-minute zone or what have you. But then it will also, based on the input from some other external source, be it a tower, a data center, what have you, it will then input a biological perturbation or a biological stimulus into the target, into the individual who has that artificial sense organ, either implanted subdermally, which is what they're looking at with the nano patch, or one that is merely just in them. It can sort of cling to to the cells of their body, or however this operation is going to go, and it will sort of balance out. It will maintain the equilibric state, the control of the control grid over that individual. So it's a negative feedback loop. It just continually goes round and round and round and round. From its initial starting point, from its initial spurts of energy. So that's why I think that's what they're going for with whatever technological, digital technological platform that they use, the attempt to control humanity. Again, be it just they stay with the more primitive form, which is handheld phones. I mean, ultimately, it's the same idea. If you force people into having a phone, into using a phone in a cashless environment, where, and of course, a highly surveilled environment with the 15-minute city zones and social credit scores and all of this, and you force people into that, then effectively you have the same effect over them as you would with the sort of more arcane or advanced forms of this technology and technological platform that we're talking about here. So the only thing is, it's more perfect. It's a more perfect control with something that literally attaches to the inherent biological system, or attaches to you through a subdermal implant or something like that.
Well, this is from the article, or just a quick read of this. One approach to build BNT's bio-nano things is utilizing biological units as substrates, such as cells, which can be considered standalone devices. That's cells in your body that can harvest its energy from the environment. So the cell or device harvests. What's the battery power? Well, it harvests energy from within the human body, such as motion or ambient frequencies, and or blood or fluid or whatever heat, whatever source it can find from within your body. So what type of molecular machines or nano machines? Here they speak about. Recent years have observed the design and implementation of molecular and nanomachines with increasing complexity and sophistication, expanding the range of their application, which now include, and here we go, right? Molecular factories, 1. 2. Self-propelling cargo carriers, number 2. Nanosensors, 3. And molecular computation. So this is what they're talking about. At a coarse grain level, molecular and nanomachines can be categorized into three main groups. 1. Molecular machines. 2. Self-assembled nanomachines. 3. Hybrid inorganic nanomachines. So, and what this class BNTs can be further divided into two categories: molecular motors and switches. So this is the zeros and ones now at play in your body, potentially. So really, what they want to do is they want to re-engineer you as a robot, I think, or at least
An
an
automaton.
android. Yeah, an
Yeah,
automaton. Yeah,
that's it. It's the
NPC.
golem. Yeah,
yeah.
Golem.
yeah. This is what they've been speaking of for in the mystery schools since, well, you can imagine, since the last Great Reset, since their last crack at it. But I've detailed as well, I think, so inevitably the way I think this goes is we can imagine this conspiracy, this idea born of the
This
quote-quote
is going to drive
demiurge.
everyone nuts, man. This is just nutty MacVitty. Like, as you were saying earlier on, the people are going to be going around with the spectrum analyzers, and this is like, however bad the thing with the vaccine and the graphene and the magnetic area around where you got the jab and all that. This is just going to drive people cuckoo because I don't know, man. This is fairly heavy stuff because this is absolute invasion of your body.
Well,
It's possession.
here's another point as well regarding it. So you remember the Sahara? Well, I think it's in America as well. They've had a few of these. The supposed Saharan sand
Dusting.
that's the dusting that's fell on the cars and all of this. It looks strangely metallic. Some of the sort of glistening particles within this supposed Saharan dust. I mean, it makes one
Mm.
wonder what is going on. What is going on? This is a
What
recent
if
development as
that's
well.
just the that would be more of the particles being put into the sky, just coming down.
Yes,
Yeah.
the digital
There,
terraforming.
Here, I'll
Yeah.
give you another quick quote while you're on that subject. Um, okay, here we go. This is about communication from whatever's in your body. Just let's assume it's now in your body operating, and it needs to communicate with the outside infrastructure, right? To tell it what to do and program it and move it around. So here we go on the communication. Quote, conventional electromagnetic communication is not deemed suitable for the Internet of Bio-Nano Things because the size of BNTs would demand extremely high operating frequencies. And now here we go to your dust, right? Your whatever's been deposited in the sky, perhaps. Fortunately, graphene-based nano antennas based on surface plasmon polariton waves have been shown to support frequencies down to 0.1 terahertz, much lower than their metallic counterparts, promising for the development of high bandwidth EM nanonetworks of nanomaterial-based BNTs using the unutilized terahertz band. So what they're saying there essentially is that graphene will they can make nano antennas with graphene, and they can have the communications happening on the terahertz bandwidth, which is kind of microwave or infrared radiation area. So that's seems to be how this stuff's going to work.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's the desired, that's the want.
Yeah.
Not really
It's
sure.
how far are they along with this stuff, Reagan? Is this like highly in a developmental kind of stage, or are they?
Well, Zeal, from the video I posted on Gilded earlier, that video is suggesting it started in 1938 to
Yeah.
47, give or take. Because that's the thing, like with Hollywood and the movies and the releases, the opponent doesn't release the information unless it's obsolete to that opponent.
Right. Yeah.
So look at our movies and sci-fi, and as much as people want to think it's all fiction and stuff like that, it's not in totality, as terrifying as that is. And I mean, the world's a big place. I mean, you don't think they already have robotic humans running around or some form of lizard-looking people or whatever sort of genetic experiments that have been going on islands of Dr. Moreau's all over the place. I mean, like I
The
said, you have
Montauk,
all the yeah,
the Montauk
yeah,
laboratory. Yeah.
you have all these people that are, like I said, they're extremely wealthy, intelligent, unlimited resources, been told from birth that they are special, perfect, prodigal, messiahs, kings, queens, all these titles, and then they're just unleashed into the world. And then it's like with the Zodiac killer, he's not the only one.
Mm.
There's hundreds that have been protected by the agencies that be for whatever purposes. It doesn't matter whether they were studying psychopathy itself. It's weird to even say that because you're basically saying it was a psychopath trying to study a psychopath and trying to understand themselves. Then, in that sense, like that's, I guess that's a psychopathic tendency. They think they can see themselves in another in a certain way. I don't know, or it's like searching back for that good person that you once were that you feel you can't return to or whatever. Where the technology actually is probably so far beyond, we'd never be able to describe it to other people. Anyone listening to this is going to just think I'm fucking nuts, to be honest.
Yeah.
Pardon my French.
Well, like, the one kind of thing on it is, it's like the Atlantis kind of theory, that the technology was at its zenith. They knew the whole lot, of what could be known, and it's not progressing in a linear manner. They already know everything, and they leak out. They're leaking out. They need to, as per the plan, like, that's the great secret, isn't it? What they talk about, it's back to this, why we're profane and they're on the inside track is because they know the great gnosis, the great mystery secret of the meaning of the universe and how to manipulate it all. And